Down on the bottom, it'll say,
Well, the poor guy.
click on that arrow by video,
I'm blind. Oh, yeah.
and then
Yeah, I'm not looking at the crown.
No, I'm
place.
a horrible lawyer.
I go home and cry each night.
Yeah.
The only camera that you
My
can choose
favorite
from.
show is
Yeah.
like How to Get Away with Murder, and I'm like, how do these people deal
It's
with
definitely-
stress?
I always watch a lot of
And I can't even see them or hear them.
That's
Or maybe I have to.
Yeah.
I feel like it's
Ah.
weird when people watch the other ones. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Anyone know how to use a Mac?
Mm-hmm.
Should I have Kevin come and set it up quick?
Oh,
Right
there.
there.
Yes. Oh.
You got something.
No, but you can't switch the camera.
Oh.
You got it, Dre.
Dre, you just read it all.
It's on you.
What the hell happened?
Natalie.
It's so little too.
On my laptop or the better?
We have his Mac. It's just not.
I'm trying to.
What are you in Zoom?
Yeah.
So you went to,
I want to hear.
It doesn't pull
It
up.
doesn't.
this one is connected.
Correct. And now I'm back on.
Why doesn't it pull up?
I gotta go back and find my.
Turn USB.
I gotta find my mouse again. Oh man.
Could just be a bad camera.
I think this group's pretty.
Should I go try grabbing the other one?
Yeah.
I guess that's the only thing I think of. You trying the other side
I was
maybe?
gonna try the
Or
side, yeah.
different side?
I know easy way.
Easy Tony. So they're this way too.
I can't even find my mouse now.
That's awful to think about yourselves. But like I think that way.
Yeah, it is right there.
I
So I gotta go
Like,
back.
when
you?
the
That's my-
answers
yeah.
class are asking, like,
There it is.
I know.
Oh yeah, you get that little small thing, eh?
I think they're trying to talk, and we can't hear you guys if you're talking to us. Setting.
Have you ever did that before? Like you have to enable it in the settings?
I think so. Driving camera.
Well, how's your brain still work? Because mine's like shut off.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
I think if I click enable HD, it might work, but I don't know how to get my mouse back over here.
Otherwise, you want to choose mine?
Where is your?
I can bring it back over. It's like at the. You see it in the corner
No,
here?
you can't bring it over.
No,
Try going up to the corner.
I can't even move it anymore. Having some technical difficulties over here.
Yes, I took off my shoes.
Really
It's a lot more
sweaty.
comfortable.
You always have your shoes.
I know. I need like shoes. I'm
I do
scared,
too.
like tennis shoes on.
Right. If I like slip on.
There.
I know this like the beginning when it was always stuck. I was thinking my shoes were always stuck. I always slip on my shoes.
Yeah, to get off the projection. First, I gotta see if you can get it here first. Once you try, do it from your computer first.
Can you guys? Are you guys muted? Because we can't hear you over here.
We can hear you if you're talking to us.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear.
Muted. Our partners is out on quarantines. We're just trying to coordinate everything. So
Perfect. Perfect. We're trying to figure out our video over here too, so we're having some difficulties.
okay, we'll just hang tight.
Sounds good.
You want to, I think you should check the camera before you use HD right now. Just kind of control. You know what I'm saying? Hold on. See if it shows up on here.
What if I slid it over there?
You want to check the camera real quick here to see if we got it? Because we still don't have it.
Nothing.
Yeah. I think so. Should I stay right on top?
Otherwise, we can turn mine. I don't have.
Have you just did it before?
Mine is
I don't know.
Wait, am I in the wrong one?
Should we? Half of the half of the other group is in a, hang on, Ashley. Half the other group is in a different Zoom meeting. This was the one under 707, right? This is where we should be.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, well, we'll try to find them and bring them over here. So
I think
Yeah,
I'm
I
in
think
the wrong
we should be on
one.
707.
Yes, I'm under 707.
Huh. 1 second then.
You know, not thinking like you're part of the problem.
here's Ashley. We're just trying to get the OA group here now.
Dude, tell Morgan to go to the right one.
So we plug in the HDMI. I don't know if it looks good on the camera because it has the camera built in,
Right.
but it's not looking at that one either.
Mhm.
Computer with that system there, you can just access your logger there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, I was worried we were in the wrong Zoom. Nice to see you.
We got it. We're gonna try to figure out how we can get like all of us maybe.
I can grab that. You know how I stand during class? I have this box that I put my computer on. I can use that.
I noticed you stand during class and I was very impressed. I'm like slouching.
On.
Morgan, which one is?
Getting any signal.
It's Morgan's phone. It might look like that too. Is this too high?
Probably. Might be a
I
little.
think almost
HDMI.
like that.
Is that it? Is that
Yeah. Can you see all of this? Okay, we're just waiting on. Yes. You said you got it automatically
I know
recorded, and then it'll
Does
get
anyone know
sent.
their stuff? I sure. Isn't it like your? Oh, I use my computer for this. Isn't it? Yeah.
Hearing aids for you.
Will be just
Yeah, it actually goes around and that's whoever's talking,
okay.
so I think it'll work.
Was anyone
Just
planning
might have to
on
log
keeping
into the.
time?
We can do it if you want us to.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
How would you like me to signal that you're getting close to time?
I'm not gonna see it.
I think you
Give us
should
a little.
make it aware if we're going way over time. You know what I mean? Just like wrap it up.
Presenting.
Okay.
Like, I think it's fine if we go a little over. Feel free to not agree.
What if we do a 15-second warning? Like we say.
Are we gonna
What's
Yeah.
This is my favorite class.
More power to them, but
me and like think Abby and
Oh, wait, we don't have to like scroll. Yeah, I can do that.
I wonder. It has to be installed.
That's just where that.
Don't use flash, so I
my
don't
heart's
think
like
that-
pounding right now.
okay.
Yeah. I think it'll work. Talking.
You gotta get out of there.
Thank you.
I'm not there. You might have to mute.
So it's Ashley,
You do it too, so I can-
Sheila, and Natalie, then us, and then all of Fargo.
We'll go back up.
Can you guys hear?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
That's your voice.
It moves to
I think so.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Jazz.
Perfect.
They don't see me.
Oh, that's cool.
How are you not talking?
I was talking. You can't still see me. That's crazy. Oh, there it is.
Takes a second.
All right, let's go ahead. All right.
This is happening.
It's really happening.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like that.
This is the activity analysis and then my slums evaluation and the picture of the rabbit.
Recently, what's that?
No, I think they're doing it.
Are like modern.
You guys cut out.
Are you guys moderating the time?
I definitely can.
I mean, we have a whiteboard.
We can do it.
We can do it for like a 30-second heads up that you guys are kind of like close to your
Yeah.
time.
That would work better because we just have paper.
Oh, it's.
You won't be able to see it because of our camera because it moves to our voices.
Until
I can hold up my notes, so I'll be taking just this, when I hold up my piece of paper, that can be like a 15-second warning or whatever, or.
Yeah.
They're cutting out now.
Yeah, they are.
Everybody too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are cutting out.
I wonder if it's because of the Wi-Fi. I don't think.
Can we turn it?
Yeah, is there?
Oh, my roommate just texted the Wi-Fi password.
Okay. Hey, give us 1 second. We're gonna try something else so you guys can hear us better, okay?
All right. I'm nervous, huh?
Oh, we wanna track you.
Yeah, I say we should.
You just tap on the table. Cause that way we're not like looking for someone we can just hear and hear it.
Yeah.
But then again, that's just gonna make me more nervous.
Someone's gonna.
What's up?
Who is it?
Well, when he was knocking, I was like, why are you knocking? And then I was like, oh, it's locked. No, it's not. Oh,
This is my lawyer.
oh
Sarah.
God.
Like I said, my dad's lawyer dreams for me will last for about 4 minutes.
You guys doing okay?
I
We're
love
having a
it.
little trouble with Wi-Fi cutting in and out, it's kind of glitching, so we're just trying something new with that other group.
Okay.
We
All right.
appreciate you setting this up for us. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry it was a little here and there. I told the other group, you know, my better ideas come to me after my kids have gone to bed and I've had a couple glasses of wine. So, but now maybe I'm second guessing. If it was a good idea. No, I really do think it's a good idea because now all of Fargo students can watch this one just after a few minutes of it being recorded. And so, and then I'll have to just convert to the other one instead of having to convert all of them. So, and I will eventually convert all of them. It takes time. So, so hopefully this helps. I'm wondering if I need to make somebody a host, the other group, because I have to bounce back and forth between groups. And so they had me make somebody else the host because every time I pop in, I take control away from somebody. Does anybody think that's going to be an issue?
I don't think it would hurt us to have one of us be a host.
Okay. So who should I make? Maybe I'll make a co-host.
Yeah. Maybe someone from Bismarck, since they're actually on a computer, we're on our TV in the classroom. So it'd probably be easier for them on a computer.
Okay. Well, I've got Natalie pulled up right here. Natalie, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, now you should have control.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anything I can do to help?
I don't think so.
Wi-Fi, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Do it for
You
us.
guys got on volume. I need me to turn it a little more.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mute myself and turn my camera off and just kind of float back and forth between groups and just kind of check on everybody, okay?
Okay,
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to get this.
Yeah.
Do you want us to do the timing then? Or do you want to with your whiteboard?
Oh,
Timing.
I think it would be easiest if you guys do it since our camera moves. If
Okay.
that works for you. Otherwise, we can try to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, because you'd never see the person with the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like wave our arms at like 15 seconds.
Everybody, or like a thumbs up.
It's 2 a.m.
Yeah. You guys can all just move.
Unless it stays at that screen, we'll be able to see.
It would, I just don't know.
Okay.
Oh, if no one talks.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's true for them. Are you guys ready to start?
Give us like.
Yeah, I think it stays at that screen for when no one
I'm gonna
talks.
have to leave a warning on the video link saying, please start at 8:11.
Right.
10 minutes later.
Right.
I hope we're doing.
I mean, I guess.
Oh, me too. I did halfway through my food.
I mean, there's no going back, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
can't retype this now.
Yeah.
Okay, so who is model A? That's PEO.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then we're model B, OA, and then you guys are model 3 or model C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Model C. Okay, are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Okay,
We're ready.
2 minutes for model A. Go.
The Person Environment Occupation Model, or PEO model, is one of many models developed since the establishment of occupational therapy profession. The PEO model focuses on the components of the person, environment, and occupation. The person is a unique being who takes on several different roles and engages in occupations that are needed or wanted in that individual's life. The personal components in the model consist of physical, cognitive, affective, and spiritual attributes. These characteristics are unique to each individual, allowing for every person to experience life in a diverse way. Another aspect that allows the individual diversity brings us to the next element of the PEO model, environment, which is everything that surrounds the person. This can include both living things and natural forces. Environment entails anything from the home to the community. The physical, social, cultural, institutional, and virtual environments are all associated with this model. The environment is a component that can have positive or negative impacts on the person's occupational performance. The last component of the PEO model, occupation, is the core of occupational therapy practice itself. The most prominent areas of occupation in this model are self-care, work, leisure, sleep, rest, and ADLs. Occupation is what a person engages in every day of their lives that provides fulfillment and satisfaction. In the PEO model, the 3 domains of person, environment, and occupation are dependent and shape the 4th domain of occupational performance. Occupational performance is the ability to perform and take part in one's daily tasks, including required activities and roles of living. Occupational performance is dynamically constructed from different contexts of an individual into one comprehensive relationship between the person, their environment, and the occupations of that individual. For optimal occupational performance, the key domains of person, environment, and occupation need to be well coordinated. The intersection of person, environment, and occupation offer a clear, understandable, and evidence-based way to which inform assessment and intervention for clients. Because of these very reasons, we believe the PEO model would be a great fit for this client's case.
Okay, so it's rebuttal for models B and C for 1 minute. Ready? Yeah. Ready, set, go.
B, are you going first?
Are you going first, B?
It's for both of us.
I think each
No,
of
I
us.
think you get a minute
We
apiece.
each get a minute.
Oh, I thought we had a minute together.
No, we
No.
each get a minute.
I can go first because I'm C and I'm doing the rebuttal.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Did you start it? Yeah. Okay. PEO is used widely in rehab settings. However, does this model look at Grace's environment that she wishes to return to? In Grace's case, she may not have the same tools or surroundings available to her when returning home as she does in the rehab hospital. The biggest example of this is when it comes time for mobility. She may be able to use a wheelchair within the rehab setting, but this may not be accessible due to the terrain that surrounds her home and her home environment. Also, this model does provide client-side care, but when placed in an acute care setting, this aspect tends to diminish. There is also more focus on mobility and activities of daily living. In our culture, this may seem important, but in Grace's culture, this may be less important. She may be fine with dependence on her husband for these tasks and rather be able to accomplish other occupations that she finds joy in. This model also contains many aspects that can sometimes be broad and very time-consuming. Due to the language barrier that Grace may encounter with occupational therapists, taking the time to explain all the components of this model may make implementing this specific model difficult.
Okay. Okay, 1 minute model B.
PEO has minimal fit that relates to minimal occupational performance. As a result, it's not a very in-depth model and it's more broad, so it wouldn't apply as well to Grace's particular case with her cultural barriers. It does not address the complex situations that she is facing at this time with her Guillain-Barré syndrome, and it does not have a specific intervention approach for her. As a result, it is not very client-centered, which she really requires given her circumstances and her disabilities. And it is used widely in acute care, and that's about it. It's not really used in other community settings often. This would be a really big problem for Grace because, as we know, she was born and raised on the reservation, so it would be really hard for her to apply a model that is very westernized and Western culture based to her circumstances. And it only talks about motivation, or it does not talk about the motivation. It talks a little bit about the spiritual process, but it doesn't address her culture well enough.
Okay. Model B's introduction. Yeah, hold on. Okay. Okay. Our client Grace is a 52-year-old Navajo woman, has gone through a lot in the last 6 weeks, from being airlifted to the hospital to continuous paralysis in her lower body due to the Guillain-Barré syndrome. And the last thing she wants to do is spend more time away from her home and community. We are proposing that the OT should use the OA model, which is the occupational adaptation model, when addressing Grace's occupational therapy needs. The model of OA describes a process of internal adaptation. The goal of this model is to facilitate the client's motivation to adapt to the given occupation that is of challenge. Ultimately, OA emphasizes that if a client becomes more adapted to the occupational challenge, they will become more functional in that occupation. How an individual responds to the given occupational challenge, there's a press for mastery there. The press for mastery comes from the individual itself and the environmental demands that are pressed on the person. Given the motivation is ultimately needed to adapt, and Grace already has that within her. She is ready to move on, and she wants to go home to her community and be surrounded by her people again. The internal adaptation addresses the client, guiding the intervention process, and occupational therapists are providing the tools needed for Grace to really interact with her occupations meaningfully when she goes home.
As far as how the OA model is, how it fits with Grace's situation is that it's very occupation based. And so it looks at all areas of occupation that are meaningful to her. And so it's very individualized. Grace has a high press for mastery. She has many roles as far as being a wife and a community member and a mother. And with those roles, there's a lot of demands placed on her. And so the internal motivation that she has to get better in return to that is very high, which is important with this model.
Okay. Does model A or model C want to go first?
I can go.
Okay, we got 1 minute, go. Okay. Hey, Lauren, we can't hear you.
Sir.
We should take turns. Restart their time.
We couldn't hear you. You cut out. You
Can you hear us still?
Hear you.
now.
Can you hear me?
No.
It like started.
It goes like back and forth.
Get a little closer.
No, just.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just gonna make a little quick rotation real quick.
We're good.
Musical chairs. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, are we ready?
Okay. Ready? Go.
The OA model really focuses on adaptation and internal change. However, Grace may not be open to changing her ways, as well as often many reservations are not open to making certain adaptations as they are set in their ways. Also on the reservation where Grace currently lives, there may not be many resources or tools to facilitate adequate adaptations, and she may not want those resources brought in to be used. The OA model also contains a lot of components and terms and can be somewhat complex, thus making it harder for Grace to understand and follow, not to mention there is somewhat of a language barrier that will make it even more difficult on Grace and the therapist to be on the same page. One last thing to mention is that the OA model does not directly assess and take into consideration Grace's internal feelings, thoughts, fears, and struggles, which she probably has a lot of since it is her first time off of the reservation, and that may greatly influence her response to intervention. Additionally, this model does not directly address or take into consideration Grace's spirituality, which could play a major role.
Model A.
So the OA model is very difficult and to interpret and explain to a client, especially being that Grace is from a Navajo culture, and is seemingly more complex and uses a lot of occupational terminology and jargon that is not found in many individuals' vocabulary, such as Grace. And it also exhibits the demand for mastery, which can restrict successful participation in occupations. And the same pressure to perform well may cause Grace to feel inadequate when she isn't able to perform that desired skill or occupation.
And in the OA model, the client is the agent of change. And while this can be an empowering statement to use, it could kind of also evoke a sense of pressure within the client that they're not able to fully engage in that process. Also, the OA model is an internal process, so there's not a sure way to measure outcomes. There's no concrete way to tell if you have affected someone's internal adaptive capacity.
Okay, model C, your introduction.
Okay, ready?
Ready? Go.
Okay, the KAWA model is different from these westernized models in that it focuses more so on collective shared interests and looks at the client as a whole within their environment. Westernized models strongly value a client's independence and autonomy in goal setting and while looking at their occupational performance. The KAWA model focuses on harmony within a client's life and their environment, striving to find a balance within. Looking at the case of Grace, she is very involved within her environment physically, spiritually, socially, and culturally. She also seems to live in a collectivist community, being from the Navajo tribe. And collectivist communities revolve more around the community as a whole rather than striving for independence of the individuals within the community. The KAWA model stresses the importance of recognizing an individual separately as well as at the community level. This brings a holistic perspective into context as we are going to be looking at the client as a whole, physical, personal, and environmental context. This model also outlines a framework that allows therapists to be sensitive and understanding of their client's circumstances within their context. By understanding client circumstances within their own context, we are able to develop truly client-centered intervention strategies that focus on bettering the client within their community. Since Grace has never left her community, except for this most recent trip to the hospital, it's important that her physical, cultural, spiritual, and social environments are taken into account when we are developing intervention plans. With this being Grace's first time off the reservation, she was probably very nervous and anxious about her future and what her future looks like. Our goal should be to understand her values, wants, and hopes of recovery instead of trying to push different strategies and ideas onto her. With a huge influence of technology in the modern day, most adaptations and intervention strategies may revolve around this. However, it is known that Grace's home life does not revolve around technology or modern day amenities. This is a great example of why we need to focus on client-centered intervention strategies that the KAWA model helps to lay out while looking at the environment and the client that the client is going to be returning home to, rather than looking at what they may have worked for a different client.
Okay, model A, your rebuttal.
Okay, so the KAWA model you argued was different than Westernized culture, which is of course true, but we argued that it was made by Japanese. And so do we really know that the client has the same connection with nature as we can assume that the clients do in Japan? Also, like, it is so culturally based, so do we know that there's no cultural bias that will happen with it? And is it truly more appropriate or understandable than an alternative model? Are the graphics helpful or are they simply confusing? Also, where is occupation in this? You argued some of this stuff, but occupation tends to be lacking in the KAWA model, or as super evident as such as in the PEO model, where you have occupation as one of the main centered around. Also, the interventions are community-based. What if the individual's culture is not community-centered or rather more individualistic? These individuals may not believe or want support from the community. How can we guarantee that she does simply based on the information that we were given?
Okay, model B, you're.
So am I your first?
No, for KAWA.
Okay.
Okay, ready, set, go.
A significant problem with KAWA is that although it is community-based and very cultural centered, that allows for Grace's occupations and her interests to get lost in the community. KAWA focuses so much on helping heal the person from an external perspective and having the community take care of them that she would lose her passions, such as cooking traditional Navajo foods, gathering food items, and painting pottery that she's been enjoying for so long. So although this might seem like a more culturally sensitive framework at first, it wouldn't allow for Grace to actually embody her culture in the long run, because it wouldn't be teaching her how to adapt with her disabilities to still be able to maintain those occupations. It would just be saying, Grace, we will take care of you because we love you. Although that is important, it is not what she needs at this time. That's why we suggest the occupational adaptation model would be a better fit for her.
Okay, we have 2 minutes to break for preparation. So I'll set the timer. All right, you got 5 seconds. Time's up.
It's B.
All right, okay, so the first group to go is model B with their body of their speech. Are you guys ready? Because we're ready. We're ready. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's ready. Okay, ready, set, go.
Okay, so OA is very occupation-based, and this applies well to Grace due to her wanting to return home and be able to complete all of her occupations again. There is a great quest for mastery here. There's a great demand between her environment and occupations, and due to this, we can help her learn adaptations that she would not need to bring home any other equipment besides her body, so she can do it herself. She has a great internal motivation that she doesn't want to spend any more time at the hospital and away from her family and community. So as a therapist, we can encourage her and bring out her internal motivation even more. There is a great adaptive responses here, and we can practice these in the hospital and kind of maybe set it up similar to her home back on the reservation, so then she's able to apply it perfectly in her environment as well.
And in regards to her culture, we think that OA would be the best of our models because it, according to the researcher of Patterson in 1997, a small community collected of researchers, social workers, and Native Americans to talk about the healthcare disparities that prevents Native Americans from really thriving in therapy sessions. They found that since there is such a different culture between traditional Native American medicine and Western medicine, Native Americans tend to not choose either approach. That's something that's unique about the occupational adaptation model is that it's very client-centered. So Grace would be allowed to lead this process, which would integrate her given culture into her own healing process, which is something that KAWA and PEO are not able to bring to the table. Additionally, we have a subset just for the culture of our client. So we're very mindful of her culture and wanting to let her lead the therapy process, which will help her to be more successful in the long run.
We get 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. Awesome. So a little bit more on this. The Navajo culture is uniquely the most community-centered culture, the second most community-centered culture in all of the Native American cultures in America. As a result, we feel that it's very important for her to be able to get back to those roles and occupations that she's been thriving in as a mother and as a painter. And so to do this, we really want her to lead the process. We want to teach her those techniques that she can use to adapt, and then she can apply the adaptation gestalt to continue to thrive with that and to continue to adapt to her circumstances. With regard to some of the points that you guys brought against OA, so that Grace may not be open to change. However, this is a client-centered model, so we don't need to force change upon her. She can lead the process. There may be a lack of resources. However, she's guiding the adaptation process so she can choose how she would like to adapt to the given circumstances, to the terrain issues, and we can just help her through what her desires are. There may be language barriers, and I think that that is a real concern. However, we've learned that her husband is able to speak fluently in both languages, so we could really utilize him as a resource. And it doesn't consider her feelings. Well, considering that this is client-centered, we care the most about Grace's feelings, that she's the individual who is leading the process. So obviously her feelings and emotions are so central to the adaptation process. It may be difficult to interpret and apply. Grace doesn't need to understand all of the terminology with this model. We use it as a framework. So it's our responsibility as therapists to understand our own model and then to help guide her through the concepts with that. And there is pressure that's naturally occurring from her environment because it is so rugged, and this model does a really great job of acknowledging that.
Okay, model A, ask the tough questions.
Doesn't say that the husband's fluent in English.
Go.
Can we start?
Yeah.
Model A?
Yeah, model A.
Okay, that would be PEO.
Model A has to ask you then, and then model C, we have what, a minute?
Okay, I was a little lost. So you have a lot of great points,
It just says
but I still am very concerned. You argue that it's client-centered, but I argue that you still have huge language barriers involved in this model. Like, no offense, you could argue that occupational terms still don't fall into the category of understanding common language, and you say you don't need them, but I'm still a little concerned that I'm not going to understand that I'm the agent of change. I don't even really know what an agent of change is. So I'm a little bit worried that there's still going to be this like language barrier gap happening with your model. The word gestalt, like, will you be using it? You used it on us, but I'm not sure you totally understand that you can't use the word gestalt. I don't quite understand what it is, and I'm a little concerned they won't.
Yeah.
Okay, model C.
Yeah. Just says he's.
Okay, so I have some questions. If Grace is not up for changing or bringing in and using resources to adapt, what will you then do? Also, how will you address cultural sensitivities when making adaptations to the environment surrounding the reservation that doesn't cut into their cultural ways or affect how they do things? Also, it has been stated that during OA application, a client often gets stuck and end up using their old adaptive responses to occupational challenges. In what ways would you be able to unstick a client who is from a collectivist society, as they may not want to change their old ways?
Yeah, and then the last question, do I have 15 seconds? You guys brought up that the husband's fluent in English, but that's never stated. So I'm just wondering where you got that information from, because if you can't communicate with him, how are you going to communicate with Grace?
Okay, model B, your body of speech. Wait, oh, we're model B. Okay, never mind. Model A. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. Okay, model A, your body of speech. 4 minutes. Ready, set, go.
Developed by Mary Law, Barbara Cooper, Susan Strong, Deborah Stewart, Patricia Rigby, and Lori Letts, the Person Environment Occupation Model was published and introduced in 1996. The PEO model aimed to condense theoretical knowledge and apply it to a guide of clinical reasoning of which could be used at any age, any circumstance, or ability level. As mentioned earlier, the PEO model aims to show the interaction of the three domains, person, environment, and occupation. Together, these elements transact to form occupational performance. Occupational performance is the ability to perform and take part in one's daily tasks, including required activities and rules of living. For optimal occupational performance, the key domains of person, environment, and occupation need to be well coordinated. When the three components of the PEO model have maximum fit, occupational performance ability is increased. When considering the domain of person, in this case, referring to Grace, it is important to consider the different components of the individual. If we look into the affective and spiritual components of Grace, it is evident that her emotions and cultural connections are motivating and driving her to go home. It is apparent that her home is part of who she is as a person. Therefore, if Grace is in her home environment, there will be a better fit because the domains of person and environment. With Grace being home, the environment will need to be modified in order to create a better fit. Some examples of modifications that you could use in this place are wheelchair access, raised garden, beds, or assistive technology. We would also need support from others to help with ADLs and mobility. These modifications then in turn support Grace's occupation and activities that she enjoys, such as gardening, being outside, and painting pottery. The transactions among these three domains increase overall fit and therefore improve occupational performance. In the three domains of the PEO model do not have good fit, occupational performance is negatively affected and their occupational performance is minimized. If the environment was not adapted to accommodate Grace, her paralysis and subsequent limited mobility and independence would further impede on her ability to participate in desired occupations. Poor fit between the domains of the environment and occupation may cause a decrease in overall occupational performance for Grace.
As one can see, this model is readily understandable, describable, and interpretable. With its easily understood visuals and graphics and descriptions, it is clear to see why this model would be a great choice when explaining the occupational process to a client such as Grace. It is clear, concise, and relatable. In addition, the PEO model lends itself to many uses and applications. As shown and described in our textbook, the application of the PEO model in occupational therapy practice has been researched and applied to many cases made available through professional literature. These examples include general practice, acute physical health care, developmental coordination disorder, and even the experiences and concerns of refugees. Additionally, we found even more examples when completing research, where we made references to both school-age children and those diagnosed with dementia. As our textbook continues to point out, there is no situation too complex for the application of the PEO model. It aims to serve a variety and age, circumstances, and ability levels. With all that in mind, it is no wonder that this was the first models we discussed in models class this year. The fluidity of the PEO model offers a clear, concise, and approachable interpretation that can and has been used on a variety of clients.
Okay, we have model B and C. You ask the questions and we can go first as model B. Ready, set, go.
So as we have a concern, as you guys have addressed that you would bring in a wheelchair, but her terrain is quite rugged and you brought up as a concern for our model as well as bringing adaptions. And then you guys are very community based. So I was wondering how you would bring in her community since she is so involved with her community and her family and with all the pottery and the cooking is such a staple in her life. So I was wondering how you would be able to bring that in with her.
And we also thought about, you guys said that with our adaptations, they might not be willing to do and convert with their culture, but you guys are also bringing in like electronic, like bed raisers and adapting her whole environment to allow her to be independent and in her environment. So I'm just wondering, how do you think she will be able to adapt to that if she's not willing to, if that's not like with her culture?
I muted us. Okay, model C. You have a minute.
Okay, so the PEO model contains many different components, and when you're working in like the rehab hospital, working with other professionals, would this model be the best choice because of all the components? How would you be able to have them work with you to apply this to Grace? How will you effectively use this model with the language barrier that is present? And how would you incorporate the family community into your person-centered model? Would you incorporate the family community? And also, if you're making all these adaptations, where are you finding the funds? That's it.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
I could ask you all the same.
Yeah, we don't have our bomb yet.
Model C. Your 4 minutes for your body.
Okay, as future occupational therapists, we can be proud to say that our profession began in helping individuals that have been cast aside by society achieve a sense of purpose and gain skills for productivity. Helping others regain their independence has been a focus of occupational therapy for the last century. Client goals can be as varied as their backgrounds. OTs use models of practice to guide their interactions with clients, set goals, and suggest interventions. Though different models of practice have the same goal of client success, both their origins and structures can be different. OT had its start in the Western world by helping individuals, but was set forth by individuals of privilege, usually Caucasian, such as Dr. William Rush and Eleanor Clark Siegel. Models of practice such as the PEO and the OA were developed in the same Western ways of thinking and practicing medicine. Though these person-centered models may work with the majority of clients, they are not all-inclusive to those clients who do not come from Western culture or may come from a more community-centered background. This is where the KAWA model can aid in OT in working with these populations. The KAWA model was developed in Japan by practitioners who realized that models of practice they were currently using were not culturally competent for all individuals. Thus, the KAWA model was born. KAWA uses the metaphor of a river to help a client describe their life flow in terms of both success and struggle in the context of their environment. The KAWA model has great moldability, which may be its greatest feature, and it can be used with clients of all ages from all backgrounds, as the river is a universal symbol. It could be explained to anyone across the globe from any socioeconomic background. As practitioners, it is important to keep in mind that anyone can get ill and everyone may need rehabilitation at some point in their life. The KAWA model will be the optimal choice for Grace in this situation. Though she comes from a background that many people would not be familiar with, most likely a rural setting in Arizona, New Mexico, or Utah, and her English is not all the way there. The KAWA model puts her in harmony with nature, something she's probably familiar with. in her Native American setting. She also comes from a matriarchal society, which means she probably will have help at some point and will want the help. It's something that she could gravitate to very easily. With assistance, a practitioner could communicate with Grace about her personal river, whether verbally or through the use of visuals. In addition to the harmonious nature of the KAWA model, one with their environment, the KAWA model also connects the collectivist nature of a Native American society to the occupational therapist. Another thing to keep in mind is Grace's diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome. That's a neurological condition. And sometimes rehabilitation for those types of neuro traumas are not always linear. So the KAWA model fits in well, that it can kind of ebb and flow just like a river. It can change very easily over time, and she can communicate the change of how she's feeling very easily, which is part of that moldability of the KAWA model. That's all I've got.
Okay. Model A, do you want to go first to ask the questions? Ready, set, go.
We're wondering if we can assume that this model can be translated from the Japanese roots that it was created in to actually fit the Navajo culture, or are we just assuming that the cultures will align? We're also wondering if this case is the best fit in your guys' view just based on her culture. Are you addressing occupation, or just that it might be easier for her to understand based on her culture, and is it available to actually come up with interventions to implement to further improve her occupational performance?
I also find it interesting that you didn't suggest any answers that you asked us within your rebuttal or your argument. So all the same questions go back to you. What are your suggestions for adaptations? Do you have those? Is this multidisciplinary? Will it work? Are your PTs in speech can understand it?
Okay, model B, go.
Okay, as far as the KAWA model goes, it would require Grace to recognize her own dysfunction and to be able to notice her obstacles and things like that. So if she's not able to accurately recognize those things, then how would you go about helping her with this model?
And going along with that, you have mentioned multiple times about this language barrier, which is it's apparent, it's there, but how do you plan to communicate with her about the dysfunction, but also explain the rocks, the river, the driftwood, the environment on the ground? Like, you can give her a picture, but what if she doesn't understand the picture? And then you try to explain it, but she doesn't understand English. So how are you going to get your point across to use the river and the driftwood and the rocks to change her occupations? That's all we have.
So now do we just go to these open 8 minutes and just kind of like wing this?
Yeah, we just have an open conversation for 8 minutes.
Okay, well, first of all, I kind of find it interesting that our model debate line doesn't actually offer us any time to rebuttal to the people that were just in front of us. And so I suppose that I could argue some of these questions like multidisciplinary approach, which we argue that our PEO model is actually very fluid and flexible and very easily explained to another PT speech. I also argue that because our specific adaptations that were listed in our in our speech weren't exactly perfect, doesn't mean that there aren't better opportunities and or suggestions that could be had.
I think what's great about all three of our models is that we're really focusing on the person, and we're really trying to uncover her culture and trying to use each of our models to discuss her culture, which I think is good. It's a positive for all of our models. Although I do believe that the OA model is the best, just because OA, although it focuses on the individualistic aspect of it, it also focuses on the community. So we're like a happy marriage of individualistic and community based. So we can work both of them into our interventions. So she's getting the best of both worlds when
Yeah.
we're doing that.
And what's really nice about that is because like in with what Morgan just said, the community and the culture is addressed at the same time. You don't lose those particular occupations. See, with PEO, it doesn't address the culture and the community to the same extent that KAWA and OA do, but KAWA doesn't address the individual to the same extent that OA does. So that's what we mean by happy marriage. We mean that it is a good balance between the two insofar as it addresses the individual and her interests, and then also the community and culture.
I want to say something is that especially OA addressed that the KAWA doesn't focus on the individual and is so like community based, but yet in your body you specifically said like in your research that the Navajo community is the most community centered. So I think that just puts it back on us. That shows we would be a good fit for that model.
And the model does focus on individualistic characteristics too. It's kind of focusing on getting the individual into their community. So it kind of focuses on all of them together.
That's fair. I would say that it is very community centered, and that's a very strong rebuttal to that. At the same time, in Grace's particular case, she has a lot of demands and a lot of needs that she likes to meet. For instance, she likes to cook her own food. She likes to paint her own pottery. She likes to do gardening. So she is in a community centered culture, but at the same time, if you strictly follow KAWA, then it's caring for her and not allowing her to flourish. So she won't be able to do that painting and gathering and gardening if we strictly rely on the community. I think it's important to talk about and it's important to discuss, but at the same time, I think that can't be everything, which KAWA kind of tends towards.
It kind of takes away from her independence. It's more of, if you allow, or if you follow the model strictly of KAWA, it would allow her to become comfortable and dependent on her community. And that might not, even though they are like a strong community base, it's not allowed, like Faustine said, it's not allowing her to flourish as an individual and then actually work through the process of her like disease and grow as a person. So it kind of limits her that way.
But do we know that she is performing all these tasks individually, or is she doing it as a community? Like, does she cook with others, or is she just doing it by herself?
Right, because the Navajo Nation is typically a a lot of homes are multi-generational as it is.
It doesn't say in the study if she's doing it like with a big group or if she's individualized.
Correct.
So we
That's
can
kind of why I was
assume.
bringing it
Right.
up.
Assume
Yeah.
either way.
Right.
Some of these things you can't do it in the community. Like you can't have someone else cook the pot for you. You can't have someone else cook the meal for you and still be doing that occupation. So you would still have to have that ability.
But you can still.
Yeah, you can have help,
Yeah.
but you need to be able to complete that individual task like personally.
I guess throwing it back to the PEO, you argue that it's not super culturally based, and I guess that is possibly true, but I think that because it's so culturally free, that we are not limited by culture and culture only. So we're seeing things like you guys are really arguing about culture and its importance on individual or community based. Ours doesn't really care. Ours is saying that it doesn't really matter because everybody is doing something. Everybody has a culture. Everybody has this background and this and rites, rituals, customs. It's possible that that's just like what we don't even need it to like really hinder or like be a part of it. Cause I mean, granted, like your culture is important, but it's not the only thing about grace.
And kind of adding on to that, culture is an aspect of the person in the PEO model. And you guys are kind of talking about individual versus community. And I think the nice thing about the PEO model is that it enables a partnership at the macro, micro, and meso level. So that's the nation, the community, and the individual and ethnic group is all considered in the PEO model.
Yeah, and I would say like how would PEO be able to bring in the Navajo healing traditions due to and not addressing any cultural issues? She is such a culturally strong woman. She wants to follow her traditional like Navajo traditions. So how would PEO be able to bring that in if they're not very culturally centered?
Because there is like a 9-step traditional healing practice for the Navajo culture, so we want to be able to integrate that.
Right. So the point of the PEO is that it's super client therapist, this partnership. So I think it's all about, of course, the therapist getting to know the client and really understanding what the client needs. It's, of course, she's going to bring up that the culture is important to her, or we assume that she'll bring that up because it was so heavily indicated within that within our case study. So it's not going away. We just learn more about her. We learn about her 9-step healing process and how we can help her with that 9-step healing process. Like, it doesn't go away. Clearly it's addressed in the environment and in the spiritual context. It's just not hindered by culture and culture alone.
What if she doesn't want to listen to a white Western therapist?
I'm a little confused on the question, because are you not white therapists?
Right, so she wouldn't want to listen to any of us. This is just like in general. How are we going to get her to listen to us if we're trying to impose all these Western things on her when she's very connected to her culture and her Navajo way? How are we going to get her to listen to any of us at this point?
And something about OA that's different than PEO is that it's client-centered. So the client would be leading it with PEO. It is very Western, kind of oppressive, like we're telling you what you need. So how would you respond to that?
I'm confused by the question. Like, are you saying that ours is not community centered? I'm confused.
We're saying that yours is more the therapist is leading it rather than the individual and sort of.
I'm just not sure that's true. Like, I think that there's like you're saying that, but I'm not sure it's the case. There's very client, and it's all based on a partnership with the client and the therapist, if that makes more sense.
But in your model, the therapist is leading it, whereas in OA, the client is leading it, and we're just guiding them through the intervention. That's what we, so that's why it's weird, because it allows for
We're over 8 minutes.
Okay, for the record, we're not hindered by these time frames. You're allowed to discuss.
Okay. Now we have a 2-minute break to prepare for our closing. It's too early. Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Because it's going to me, please.
Okay, you got 3 seconds. All right, got none. Okay, model A, your closing statement. Ready? You have a minute. Go.
The PEO model is the best model for this case because it is fluid and flexible, allowing it to be applied to complex client situations, such as the case with Grace, to help guide OT reasoning. This model is occupationally grounded and stresses the importance of the relationships between factors of a person that further expand their occupational participation. Personal factors that influence occupational participation for Grace include not only her Native American culture, lifestyle on the Navajo reservation, and her roles and responsibilities in the home and with the livestock. The PEO model strengthens the occupational perspective of health for Grace by considering each of the 3 domains and their transactive nature. Understanding Grace's interests, values, wants, and needs will help the OT to make the best treatment plan to improve performance in desired and necessary occupations within her desired home environment.
Perfect. Okay, model B, you're closing. Go.
Always the best model for Grace's case because it's very client-centered. It allows her in this model to guide the intervention, and then the therapist just offer support. Something that's very important is her husband and her daughters share a wealth of knowledge to give her support and allow her to flourish as an individual. Something that's really important about our model is the adaptive responses, which allows her to adapt new energy into the occupations that she already loves, and then it forms new response modes to be able to modify her environment and be able to grow new pathways to be able to take home, and then apply those new pathways to be able to adapt to her new environment.
Okay, model C, you're closing. Ready?
Yep.
Set, go.
The KAWA model is best suitable for this case in many ways. This model really focuses on the client's harmony with Grace herself and throughout the environment, social, physical, culture, and spiritual, rather than changing the client itself. As Grace is from a Native American culture, it allows her to show her culture's perspective and the difference it has from the American culture. Since their culture standpoint seems to be collective rather than individualist, this model will allow Grace and her family to make decisions revolving around not just her, but also the environment or community around her. Being able to under sensitivity to the client's circumstances will help to enable positive therapy outcomes. For example, at the Navajo reservation, Grace's home doesn't have modern technology, so being able to focus our intervention plan based on Grace's environment will benefit her and her family when returning back to home. As an OT, this model creates every opportunity to enhance and maximize Grace's harmony of life within herself and the environment. Also, you guys mentioned that our visual aids would not be universal or be able to communicate. The river is a universal language.
Everyone, you did great.
I'm happy that's done.
I'm glad that's done.
Yeah, me too.
We're all done.
We're
Good
done.
job,
Good job,
everyone.
guys.
Okay. Are we just supposed to log off, or is he here, Lawson?
Dr. Lawson.
You here?
Lawson, help.
There he
We're done.
Okay, spit out.
My office, and so in there, my head is always.
Good, like 10 seconds.
I know, I was like, she did that, I was like, words.
Yeah, I think I can end the meeting. Actually, I can't. Whoever wants to end the meeting.
We can just
leave.
Yeah, let's just leave.
Good job, guys.
The recording should go in the cloud.